start the online meeting. Dr. Lammers, please.
Yeah. Dear head of the Polish delegation, Przemysław Czarnecki, our dear friend Michał Szczerba, dear colleagues, NATO parliamentarians, dzień dobry, good afternoon and guten Tag from Heidelberg. It is a great pleasure for me and my fellow co-chair John Speller to lead the delegation of 2 NATO Parliamentary Assembly subcommittees on this online visit to Poland. For me, Warsaw is a very special place, and not only because it was here during our annual session in 2010 that I was elected president of the NATO PA. I will never forget this moment in my life. As a parliamentarian, I'm fascinated by Poland's centuries-long parliamentary tradition. As a Democrat, I'm inspired by the Polish people's inherent love for freedom and their willingness to fight for it if necessary. In this context, I would remind my colleagues that Poland has recently celebrated or is about to celebrate 2 important anniversaries. 275 years since the birth of the Polish Garibaldi Tadeusz Kościuszko, a national hero in Poland and the United States, and 230 years since the adoption of the Europe's oldest constitution on the 3rd of May, which was one of the most progressive documents of its time. Finally, as an Atlanticist, I have an enormous respect for the role Poland plays in strengthening our unique transatlantic alliance. You are truly a stalwart of NATO. Your contribution to our common defense and to NATO missions is indispensable, as is your expertise on the challenges in our eastern neighborhood. Dear friends, we are all very aware that the global security landscape has changed dramatically in recent years, and that we are now facing a plethora of new challenges, from the devastating COVID-19 pandemics to the rising China, emerging disruptive technologies, and climate change. But we must not lose sight of the fact that the emergence of new challenges does not mean that the old ones have gone away. We still need to ensure our territorial defense, counter the Kremlin's assertiveness, and develop a clear strategy vis-à-vis the unfinished transition in Eastern Europe. In this context, this online visit to Poland is extremely timely and relevant, and I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our Polish friends for hosting us today and tomorrow. The briefings we will be getting today and tomorrow will be instrumental for the reports in our political committee and the economics and security committee, including on how to tackle the Russian challenge, the situation in Belarus, and the economic consequences of the pandemic. Naturally, nothing can replace a physical meeting, and we would all really love to be in the beautiful city of Warsaw. But as the Polish proverb says, lepszy wróbel w garści niż nic, which we also have in Germany and can be translated maybe better as better a sparrow in hand than the pigeon on the roof. So let's make the most of our online meetings until we can meet properly, hopefully sooner rather than later. With that, I'd like to yield the floor to our Polish hosts, and I look forward to our productive exchanges over the upcoming 2 days. Dziękuję bardzo. Mr. Szczerba, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Dear Mr. Chairman, dear Carl, dear colleagues, on behalf of Polish delegation to NATO PA, let me join to Mr. Lammer's welcoming. I wish we could meet physically in Warsaw, especially as the weather is quite nice today. Nevertheless, because of pandemic situation, we have to work remotely, what I think will be useful and interesting. NATO is facing a growing number of challenges and threats, of which some will be discussed during today's visit of NATO PA subcommittees. We as Polish state and society always put a special significance to relations with NATO, actively participating in all allied actions. We are concerned of growing tensions in the area of our eastern borders, caused inter alia by aggressive action of Russia Federation in Crimea and Donbas. We are deeply concerned and involved in Belarusian situation. In our today's agenda, we have 2 points. First, presentation of Poland's foreign policy priorities and views and on challenges confronting the alliance by Mr. Paweł Jabłoński, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. Unfortunately, Mr. Zbigniew Rau, the Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs, couldn't participate in this meeting. After the presentation of Minister Jabłoński, we will conduct question and answers round. After a short, dear Mr. Chairman, dear friends, on behalf of Polish delegation, on behalf also of Przemysław Czarnecki, our head of delegation, I would like to welcome you in Warsaw, and please, Mr. Jabłoński, Mr. Minister, take the floor.
If we could ask Mr. Jabłoński to click on a request to speak button so we could bring you up on the screen. Yep. Oops.
Oh, you can hear me now. Is that right? Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm very pleased that it is my duty today and with this opportunity on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland to participate in this very important session of the However, our foreign policy key tenets remain unchanged. They include respect for international law, active participation in regional and international fora, and our attachment to the concept of sovereignty. Within these parameters, we are consistently working to achieve our priorities, which include strengthening Poland's security, growth, and global standing. The principles of the Polish foreign policy are set out in the Polish foreign policy strategy for the years 2017-2021. Now, let me present 2 key pillars of the Polish foreign policy strategy: security and the other being social and economic growth. This time, due to the topic of the session, I will put greater focus on the first one. In the first pillar, I would say that NATO plays a central role in our security policy, and special attention is paid to activities aimed at enhancing the alliance, which has to constantly adapt to negative trends in the international environment. Although new challenges have emerged, the old ones have not disappeared. Russia continues to be the most serious threat for the Euro-Atlantic alliance. Our policy on Russia must be based on a sober assessment of Russia's attitude, its actions, approach, and intent towards us. Russia increasing military capabilities right at the NATO's doorstep is a source of serious anxiety. We're concerned with Russian military buildup along NATO borders, especially in Kaliningrad. The exclave remains and becomes more and more militarized space in Europe. One of the most heaviest militarized spaces in Europe right now. Russia has also not slowed down its conventional and nuclear modernization. Our 2020 military exercise cycle only confirmed that Moscow is capable of launching multi-domain military operations. And in 2021, a new military district was created based on the Northern Fleet. Moreover, allies should also turn their attention to threats posed by the development and application of new disruptive technologies by Russia. Inter alia, I think here of missile technologies, including hypersonic ones, capabilities to disrupt sea lines of communication, also A2AD, so anti-access and anti-denial capabilities. We must also not forget that growing Russian influence on defense and military spheres in Belarus has also direct negative impact on the security of NATO eastern flank. The situation can only deepen due to political vulnerability of Alexander Lukashenko, and in the coming months we should focus on the mass-scale Belarusian-Russian Zapad 2021 maneuvers, a part of which will be carried out close to the eastern border of NATO. At the same time, for the last 1.5 years, Russia has been very reluctant to engage in the NATO-Russia Council. Nevertheless, some channels of communications are still open. They have a role to play in relation to risk reduction and transparency. But as there is no positive change in the Russian behavior, we need to uphold this two-track approach to Russia as agreed in NATO: deterrence, defense, and dialogue. I believe it should also be reaffirmed at NATO summit this year. Hence comes our priority, which is to strengthen NATO eastern flank deterrence and defense posture. At the same time, we stick to the principle that security of the Euro-Atlantic area is indivisible and should be implemented 360 degrees around. But the strength of the alliance comes from the unity of its members. At the recent NATO Foreign Ministers meeting, we reaffirmed the enduring transatlantic bond between Europe and North America, with NATO as the foundation of our collective defense. Close political, economic, and military relations between US and other NATO allies are indispensable for Europe's security and successful dealing with global challenges. In this context, we welcome President Joe Biden's declaration of commitment to transatlantic and multilateral cooperation. I'm also glad that we have agreed to the need to update NATO's strategic concept. Between NATO 2030 process and the Secretary General's proposals, we arrived at a good conceptual basis for this work. Poland is ready to further engage in it. From our point of view, when we approach this work, we need to realistically address and prioritize threats from all directions based on how much they impact on our security. We should pay particular attention to credible defense and deterrence, to coherence of the alliance based on strong transatlantic partnership and improved consultation processes, to strengthening political deterrence and resilience, and to the open door policy, which we need to uphold for the benefits of our partners and our own security. To close the NATO-related topic, let me just say a few words on some issues related to our focus areas. First, we need to be consistent and persistent in our military adaptation. This is the backbone of deterrence and defense, and consequently, the backbone of our security. Second, NATO needs to be our primary transatlantic platform to discuss and coordinate on all issues that affect our shared security. Third, we need effective political deterrence that supplements the military one and makes it more credible, both in the eyes of our adversaries, but also of our own societies. This instrument can be developed in close cooperation with our like-minded partners, especially the EU. Fourth, we need to increase resilience of our militaries, governments, and societies as a whole. We need to be better prepared for threats related to hybrid and cyber, disinformation, climate change. The resilience is also related to energy security and I believe NATO should bridge gaps in its defense infrastructure on the eastern flank, also regarding the NATO pipeline system. Let me stop for a moment on this topic. Energy security, although not a core NATO priority, remains a key enabler with regard to deterrence and defense efforts, as well as our general resilience. Thus, energy supply, as affecting readiness of our troops, should be perceived also from the security perspective. Last but not least, continuation of the open door policy. It is important to maintain our engagement in this topic and keep it high on our agenda. The difficult part is to carefully manage, on the one hand, so-called enlargement fatigue, while on the other, aspirants' expectations. But if we talk of security issues, we also point to the cooperation with the EU and at different regional fora. As regards European security and defense policy, the ongoing reflection process of strategic compass formulation will be an important element defining the shape of future European security. For Poland, the 360-degree approach, as well as close EU-NATO cooperation, are key in this regard. The complementarity of CSDP, security-related activities, and NATO's deterrence role for the Euro-Atlantic area are crucial and should be pursued as a matter of course. With respect to regional cooperation, regional security formats are extremely important from the point of view of strengthening synergies and potential of the countries in our region, both in the context of the security of the eastern flank of the alliance, and well as coordination among Baltic, Visegrad and Black Sea partners. I would like to mention three of these, which I think demand special noting. First, the one launched in 2015 on the initiative of the President of Poland and Romania, the Bucharest 9 format, commonly referred to as the B9, which includes Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Romania and Bulgaria. Currently, is the most important forum for exchange of views and coordination of positions in the field of security of Central European countries located at NATO eastern flank. It meets on several levels, including presidential, heads of parliaments, foreign and defense ministers. Another initiative, the Visegrad 4, the V4, a platform for promoting regional interests, including with respect to security issues. And Poland currently holds the presidency of the V4. And also the 3 Seas initiative, a key project for Central European countries, aimed to strengthen our region's infrastructure and interconnectedness. The initiative has become even more important due to the pandemic. We welcome very much US interest in supporting this project. Now, let me say something about the second pillar of the 2 that I mentioned in the beginning. The second key pillar of the Polish foreign strategy is social and economic growth. Here, we focus on the protection of Poland's economic interests, as well as on strengthening our position on foreign markets in Europe and beyond, especially in Asia and the economic center of gravity today. Membership in the EU remains a key platform for our socio-economic development. Currently, all governments across Europe are preoccupied with the fight against COVID-19 and ensuring the post-pandemic recovery. Hence, the importance of the recently agreed recovery plan for Europe, the EU's long-term budget, coupled with Next Generation EU, designed to boost economic growth, will be the largest stimulus package ever financed through the EU budget. We also believe that the EU should remain open towards its neighborhood. New impetus should be given to the Eastern Partnership as a principal platform for cooperation with our neighbors. We've been supportive of EU enlargement policy and actively endorsing Western Balkan countries' quest for membership. We have a clear vision of the future of the European integration. We want the EU to be open, strong, democratic and efficient. EU should also enjoy the support of all its member states, otherwise its democratic legitimacy might be undermined. It should serve European citizens and contribute to the economic growth and prosperity of its societies. A strong and efficient EU should make best of its common market based on 4 freedoms, including the freedom of movement of services. It is my belief, my strong belief, that the parliamentarians of the member states have an important role to play in the process of enhancing defense, security, and the prosperity of the Euro-Atlantic community, both in legislative, budgetary, and political dimensions. It's very important that parliamentarians are involved. Only unity of efforts, solidarity and coherence will give us the ability and power to face effectively the challenges that we are made to face. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Deputy Foreign Minister, Mr. Jablonski, for your great presentation. I would now like to ask if any delegates have any questions. And if so, please request the floor and Andreas will pull you up screen.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Chairman. We would like to ask those delegates who are willing to pose a question to click on Request to Speak button. It usually takes a little bit of time for delegates to register their questions. Yeah, in the meantime, we do not have any questions yet, but I'm sure. Just one second. Yes, we have our Secretary General, Ruxandra Popa.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, dear Carl. It's great to see you.
Hello,
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much for hosting this joint visit in Poland. And Mr. Deputy Minister, thank you so much for your excellent introduction to kick off this meeting of our two committees. Obviously, I suppose, yeah, the topic that is on everybody's mind at the moment is indeed Russia's military buildup in and around Ukraine. So I'd be interested if you could tell us a little bit more about how Poland's assessment, how Poland assesses this move by Russia right now, and what possible responses could be from NATO's side. We know Secretaries Austin and Blinken are traveling to Brussels this week. That will send obviously an important message. I believe the Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs is also traveling to Brussels. So all this signaling is very important for our Ukrainian friends, obviously. But I'd be interested if you could tell us a little bit more about how the Polish government is looking at these developments and Russia's intentions behind these movements. Thank you very much.
Should I answer now, or should there be some more questions now? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very important question indeed. This situation is very worrying. We have been alert for last days, over a week now. Very strong significance of growing military presence, and the situation is very concerning because indeed it starts to resemble the situation we have been facing back in 2014. Before the war started and before the illegal annexation of Crimea. What is even more worrying are certain reports that there are some backstage negotiations related to one issue I briefly mentioned during my introduction, namely the energy security, that the Russian side would be willing to de-escalate the conflict only in exchange for approval of Nord Stream 2 project. This would be very worrying because indeed, if this would happen, this could actually lead to repeating of the situation within a couple of years. But then the Russian side would have much stronger hand while having potential ability to cut off the energy supply to Ukraine. And this is very worrying. We are underlining this importance of consistent, unified approach between all the partners in the EU, the US alike. We are very satisfied that this reaction is strong this time, and we only count on continuation of it. That we won't be just limiting ourselves to declaration without meaningful action. Here we must exert even stronger pressure that would lead Mr. Putin to understand that if he continues to act this way, if he continues to threat the security of countries to his western border, this will not remain without response from NATO and from EU. And here, I think that the policy that's been implemented by the EU and also United States and other countries, the policy of economic sanctions, the policy also of targeted sanctions, this is the policy that indeed is still hurting Vladimir Putin's administration. And we should continue that, despite what we might very often read here and there that these sanctions are ineffective. They are effective. They do harm economic interests of Mr. Putin and his people, and we should always remember that, because this is what we can actually impose, and we should be consistent in this policy.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Mr. Lammers, Mr. Szczerba, we currently have one speaker on our list. It's Mr. John Speller, co-chair of this visit from the NPA side. Mr. Speller.
And while the focus at the moment is for the military build-up on the borders of Ukraine, we have had significant build-ups previously on the borders of the Baltic allies, and the question about the ability to respond to that, and particularly to resupply and to mobilize. And I noticed in the documentation concerns about the transport infrastructure in the eastern part of Poland, but also, of course, the ability through the Suwalki Gap to reinforce the Baltics. I just wondered if you've got any current thoughts on that.
Please, Deputy Minister.
Thank you for this question. This is indeed also a source of concern, continuous source of concern. Kaliningrad and the Suwalki Gap, this area is this area on the Russian side is indeed one of the heaviest militarized zones in Europe right now, and this is very worrying, obviously from Polish perspective, but also from perspective of the Baltic countries that are both potentially targeted. Also, the situation in Belarus, which effectively, and we will surely hear a little bit more about this by the next speaker, by Mrs. Cichanowska, but this is also very potentially threatening situation, because indeed Russian and Belarusian military are working very closely together, to the extent that some call Belarusian army just a separate division of the Russian army, which probably is an exaggeration, but definitely the cooperation is very close, and potential joint military operation could also be, this is also absolutely imaginable. So there is definitely a need to strengthen the eastern flank even further, not just in numbers, but also in potential in enhancing the abilities to effectively mobilize soldiers, to effectively transport them, to effectively address the situation also in hybrid threats, against these hybrid threats that we are facing. We should engage to a stronger extent also the European Union here, all these countries that are being members of NATO, also members of the EU, and this solidarity should also be not just expressed, but also followed by meaningful answers to it. So answering to your question, this is definitely concerning, and we are not forgetting about this. Absolutely not. This is actually what we have been facing with as Russia's neighbor for many, many years now. Right now, the new build-up not close to Ukraine's border is obviously source of even greater concern, but we should never forget that the situation might turn very unstable also in other parts of the border.
Thank you very much. And we have a question from the Latvian Parliament, Ojers Kalnins, who is also chairman of the NATO PA and Ukrainian Interparliamentary Council.
Yes, well, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Deputy Minister. I have a question about Poland's views about the changes in the U.S. administration. the EU, you talked a great deal about the importance of the EU. EU-US relations suffered a great deal over the last 4 years, and there's an attempt to rebuild that now, and which is critically important not only for the European Union but also for NATO, because of the U.S. involvement in NATO. And so I was just wondering if you could, if you can comment about that. And also, we had heard in previous years plans to relocate troops from Germany to Poland. I don't know whether that's still actual or not. Do you know anything more about that? I think for us, the most important thing is that those troops stay in Europe, regardless of which country they go to. But I'd be curious to hear some of your views on that. Thank you.
This has also been Poland's position very consistent that we are most of all supportive of every step towards expanding American defense presence in Europe. Obviously, depending on strategic needs, this should be placed in the countries that require the most, that there are the biggest potential tactical necessity for it, but also possibility to move them and to deploy them effectively and efficiently within short time frame if need be. We never actually endorsed any such a step, and I think this was more or less a media story, media narrative that these troops would be moved from Germany to Poland. We have never negotiated that, and we have been very open about it. That what we support and what we believe should happen is that the European-American alliance should be reflected in greater presence of American troops on European soil, because this has been a guarantee of European safety for decades. We believe it is the guarantee of safety still, and this is the best sign also that the NATO is living and breathing in a strong alliance. So we only support that. I think with the new administration, the new administration shares this approach, and so we will be hopefully cooperating with the new administration as good as with the previous one and the one before that. I think this is, when it comes to security and strategic interest, there are really not that big differences. So we can only hope, and I think this goes not just for Poland but for other countries of Eastern Flank too. I think in Latvia is one of the most concerned countries, that the increased physical actual presence of NATO soldiers is a crucial element of maintaining security, and we should be underlining the need for it in all NATO frameworks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jablonski. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sherba, we do not have any delegates willing to take the floor at this stage. If
Okay.
just wait a minute, we might have. Oh, we have Lord Jobling from the United Kingdom. Lord Jobling, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
you hear
can.
me all right?
We
thank
can
you.
hear you.
I'm very intrigued to hear the Polish views about the build-up of Russia in the area, both in Kaliningrad, where a number of us went some years ago, and also on the Ukraine border. Now, we are very familiar with the Russian tactics of misinformation, and I'm wondering if our Polish colleague would tell us whether he's satisfied that we are countering in a sufficiently efficient way what I'm sure is a torrent of Russian misinformation, which is surrounding all this build-up and this new tension, which is so concerning.
Thank you for this question. It's a very important issue that you raised, and I do agree that we have started to do something in this respect, and this is definitely a positive sign that this threat has been identified, that certain steps were taken, that Russian disinformation has already become a thing that is at the core of our strategy. But still, I believe we need to do much more. We need to do we need a much stronger and effective action in order to effectively fight it, because in order to stop it, in order to fight the effects of disinformation, it is not sufficient to simply identify wrong sources, identify false narratives. It also requires much more active policy in order to keep our citizens aware of the fact that many of the stories that they are being offered, not just by the media, but also by the social media, by various channels of communication, that many of those might actually be a product of misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation, as it's defined in various ways. So sometimes there are even true information being publicized, but in a way that mischaracterize them, or that they are intended to harm, that they are intended to actually diminish our citizens' morale, our citizens' faith in their societies, because this is the main goal of this disinformation policy. Not simply to lie, but to reach an effect when our citizens, our nations, stop believing in anything they read, or they also stop believing whatever happens, and they start to question absolutely everything, and then they are even more susceptible to potential disinformation. So we definitely should do more in order to fight this. We should work much stronger, not only in identifying the sources, but also to implement measures to inform our citizens how to effectively find and distinguish the false information from the credible source of information. And we could do this by an effective policy that would be related to imposing actual costs, actual the result that would be financially felt by the authors and sponsors of the misinformation. We should do much more in this respect to fight this, these false narratives, and also the companies that facilitate them. We see this as a big problem, not just in Poland, but in many European countries, that must be tackled more effectively together.
Thank you very much. We